This is the annual operating and capital budget, tentative budget, and I want to be sure everyone understands the word tentative here. This is not the final budget. This is the time of year that we look over the work that our department heads have done, their superintendents have done, and then also just to point out, I'm not sure, I know some of you realize it because you're involved, but some of you have started this budget process with the trustees and the department heads back in January. And so this has been a 2.5 month process. So when you see some of these things and it looks like that they may be automatic, they're not automatic. There's a lot of work on your part with your department heads and the department heads with our employees. So that being said, I'd like to move to page 8 of the tentative budget. Page 8 is the budget summary, and things that we need to notice is that our estimated beginning balance for this fiscal year that we were on, which is fiscal year 2013, we have a total reserve of budgeted reserve of $17,996,000. Almost $18 million of budgeted reserve we had starting May 1 of 2012.
We actually, Norm, we had 15.
All right, where's that number?
Well, that was last year. Because what I do is I estimate,
now
I look at our
estimated it up, what it's going to be.
I see what revenue we've received and what expenses.
Okay.
So last year, we estimated that we would end this year with 15.5 million. Now I'm estimating that we will end this year with 17.9.
So that is an estimated.
It's estimated.
Right. So we did $2 million more than what our reserve is $2 million higher more than what we were planning.
And I would say this is probably even conservative, but that's me.
That's what you're paid to be.
That's right.
Okay.
And again, excuse me, Your Honor. Just for clarification on that, Madam Treasurer, that's the $3 million cash reserves in the general fund plus all the other specific itemized reserves.
Yes, so we have, well, it depends on which one you're looking at. If you're looking at this, what I'm estimating when we finish this year, which would actually on your sheet would be estimated beginning balance, that would show a $4.6 million reserve.
Okay.
And then it is important to note that we have the stormwater depreciation reserve, which is kind of a savings account that we use just so that when we do capital projects, we have money available. And we have $340,000 there. The gas depreciation reserve, we have $1.2 million there. And then in the water and the wastewater depreciation reserve, we'll have about $2 million. So these are set aside, for capital projects, but just so you can kind of see. And then we have other, then the remainder in those gas, water, and stormwater, that is your operating.
So you really have about $8 million in savings account that are in certain funds.
That are set aside.
So when we say $3 million in the general fund, we really got $8 million in savings accounts and $10 million in operational.
Well, totally you got 17.99 are estimated of reserves among everything.
But at the end of 4/30/2012, our general fund was 5.6 million. So I think when she's projecting 4.6 million at the end of 13, she always projects heavy on the expenses and low on that, because me and Mr. Newhouse was in the office a couple months ago, and we noticed that we went from normally around 3 million reserves to almost 5.6. It fluctuates between 3.3 and 5.6, correct?
Correct.
And we really came to the conclusion that all these cost savings, Norm, and that $1 million we spent on meter reading, cost savings in the front office, administration, I think it's starting to show a reflection of that the last 3 years of taking the initiative to spend some money to do these things, and we're saving it because our general fund balance has really been up about $2 million.
basically what we're doing, is what we're saying is we're spending less, our expenditures are less than our anticipated budget was going to be.
Yes.
For that increased our reserves.
Well, and that's, I mean, I think that that comes across. All of our department heads try their best not to spend. So I see them doing that. You know, they are looking, department heads and superintendents, they're looking at their budgets. We have to recognize that sometimes they put things in the budget. I don't remember which one of you it was. Was it a drill rig that you had in, or it was something that you had in for 4 years, just in case it broke down? And they never bought it. They just continuously had it until that point where it did break down. So they wanted to be covered for the budget, but they'll also use something down to, you know, they'll use it as much as they can.
That's a very good example, because we've had air compressors and everything else in there for 6 and 8 years, and we've never used it, so. But I mean, when you have $8 million in savings there, the citizens need to realize this community pays its bills, we're very well balanced, and there's $19 million there.
I just want to clarify, because we use different figures, and public see it and hear it. First one to agree that governmental accounting is more difficult than, at least in my mind, than business accounting. So sometimes it's hard to see where these things are. And I usually use the figure that we've been carrying here, the $3 million cash reserves in the general fund, and regard all the rest of them as dedicated for whatever their particular purpose is. But if anybody who's watching or listening is concerned about it, we can answer the question. But it's the total, yeah, 17.
But I think these citizens sometimes see us spend $4 million for this, or $2 million, they wonder how we came up with that, and that's out of these savings account for those specific
Yep.
things, because when you look at our track record for the last 3 years, we're still doing over $4 million of capital projects every year.
Right.
And paying cash, because I had a contractor buddy who goes, well, you know, these communities, they're just gonna have to quit spending so much money. I said, well, not in Morton. I said, we're still doing as much. And he goes, you are? I go, yeah, we're still going to do nearly $5 million this year and pay cash. And it floored the man, because he hears all these communities cutting back, and even through this downturn, we're still doing $1 million of the blacktop for the last 16 years since I got on the. We did chip seal the year before, so for 16 years, this community needs to know we've done $1 million of the blacktop every year, plus of $3 to $4 million of capital projects every year, and we're paying cash for all that.
Right. No deficit spending.
Okay, speaking of that deficit spending, let's look at the next column on that same page. Anticipated revenues, all funds. General fund, right on down through gas fund, water, wastewater, is a total revenue of $29,485,400. And we have about $8.8 million of, in the third column, of other financial sources, so a total fund reserve available. That's what you do there, is you add the estimated beginning balance, your revenues, your other finances, and that gets us to about $56.3 million. Then the first, second, third, fourth, fifth column is the proposed expenditures. So this year, our anticipated expenditures are $28,182,380. Just a shade over $28 million worth of expenses we're anticipating for this next year.
It's flat with 2012, is it not, Your Honor, roughly?
I'm sorry?
Roughly flat with 2012, I believe.
I think so,
We're pretty close.
yeah. Now,
Just real
so our revenues, total revenues are $29.4 million. Our total, and our plus $8.8 million, but let's just use the $29.4 million with the $28.1 million in expenditures. So we are spending over $1 million less than the revenue that we're taking in.
And Madam Treasurer, too, we had talked the other day, one of the things that when you're doing your projections using the formula from the Illinois municipal codes, you're pretty conservative on that as well. That's
Yeah.
one of the things that I want to point out, that while she's doing that, the anticipated revenue, she's being conservative to make sure that if there is unexpected or unanticipated expenditures that do have to be handled, we can probably work them in the budget. So that was good to know. It's my first time going through the budgets. You always like to see that part of it happen, so.
Okay, the next to last column is about $9.18 million in other financing uses. And then the final to the right is the estimated ending balance, the estimated reserves as of April 30th of 2014. That is $18.991 million. That is $995,000 more reserves at the end of the next fiscal year than what we have at the end of this fiscal year. Now you ask, well, what does $18.99 million really means? It means 67 or approximately 67% of the budget we have in reserve. So if every penny stopped coming into the village, we could go approximately 245 days before we would need money. And the next question is that I could see being asked, do you need that much? I'd like to point out that this taxing body has probably got the smallest amount of reserves of any of the taxing bodies in the community. But just think about a mile-wide tornado coming through this community. It would not take very long to use up $18 million to rebuild the infrastructure.
And I served on this board when the last big tornado went through, and to clean up the town that time, and we cleaned it up in sections, it cost us $250,000. And the 6 trustees sitting here, we voted unanimously to go ahead and write that check, and we paid that $250,000, and everybody could stack whatever damage along the street, and we picked up the communities in sections, Your Honor. We paid the bill, and that's why we have that disaster fund now, where we have $150,000 cash for instances like that. And we cleaned up this town and didn't have debris. So yes, that's a very good example. And that was $250,000 just to clean up things.
One water tower is $1 million plus, isn't it? So that's the reason why all taxing bodies have reserves, is because of emergencies. You've got to have them.
While we're talking about surpluses, Your Honor, maybe it's worth mentioning, since the question's been raised, I think, about, why some of this isn't returned to the taxpayers. And I guess my argument would be that it is returned to the taxpayers in the form of the surplus. That's money that a taxpayer doesn't have to pay down the road. And with respect to the gas rates, that it's an immediate rate reduction when we have a reduction, so that goes directly to the consumer at the time that the price changes. So there are avenues to serve the taxpayer's interest here.
And I would add to that, when you're doing $1 million of the blacktop a year, that $1 million now, today's dollars, compared to maybe when I talked to Bob the last time, it's probably 7 years ago, it only does 40% of what we used to do. And we're still about the only community that does it, because I get over everywhere, and I can give you all kinds of chip seal examples in very nice areas of Peoria and other towns that we're very fortunate to be able to continue blacktop.
Contractors love Morton, by the way.
Yeah.
They're always knocking on the door. What are you guys doing this year? So we definitely keep our infrastructure up, saving money for future stuff. So.
And saying that, most of them know our inspections are tougher than anybody's, but they also know, even in the blacktop, they pass our inspections. 30 days later, we write the check for the full amount, and that's why we get good prices. And they know in the spring we're going to do something, and they line up for it.
Plus, we pay our bills right on time.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to page 10. That's a graphic of the revenues versus expenditures. And then we go into page 11. This is all of the general fund revenues, all on one page. If you go to page 12 and 13, you can see how they're broken down by categories of taxes, license, permits, intergovernmental revenues, fines, service charges, service fees, other revenue, and other financial. And go, yes,
I
sir.
did have a question on item 3455, State of Illinois grants, $360, is that,
34,
360,000.
$360,000?
We have a $250,000 sidewalk. The
And that's
Safe Routes
where
to
that
School
is coming from,
is
okay.
part in there.
Okay,
And then the other would be the highway maintenance. We get money for highway maintenance for the stuff that we do. And then we also get the traffic safety. That's where that money would be. So they reimburse us for the time that our officers,
Okay,
you know,
so it's a
spend doing-
combination of grants from the state, various departments, or?
Yeah, the highway maintenance is 25, 30,000, I think, and that's for like Jackson, which is IDOT. We actually maintain some of that, and then they reimburse us for that.
I think that's about a 4-year contract or so when we negotiate that.
Yep.
Worth noting, Your Honor, that the property taxes are about 1.8 million out of 12 million. So as we documented before, that's, the majority of our budget comes from sources other than property taxes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up. 1.8 million for the property taxes and then sales taxes, because we have questions. Why does the village want to bring in retail? Well, the sales taxes are $3.45 million is what our estimate is. And so they almost double the amount of sales tax that we get than we get from real estate tax. And so it's very important for us to get as much sales tax as we possibly can, because everything goes up in price. And so if we can pick up more sales tax, we don't have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money.
And
We
that's-
also have one of the lowest tax rates around.
And
when
we
you
have one of the
compare it
lowest
to other
real estate
communities.
tax rates around and the lowest
sales
sales
tax.
tax rate around.
Right.
And the growth has come from increased business, not from increased taxes.
I would suggest those people who are complaining about a 7% on our sales tax at 7% should probably stop going to Peoria or East Peoria and spending 8 and 9.
And to show,
It goes back to a lot of people don't want to say that we're a tourism destination or a tourism community. Well, if you think of tourists as visitors, the more visitors we get spending money in our restaurants and our stores, the less it has to come out of our pockets. So I think that's, one thing with Mrs. Piles putting together all the tourist activities in the summer, that's people spending money in our community that ups this number, and it takes the pressure off our citizens.
and you also have to realize for the 1.8 million in taxes, we do over $4 million of capital projects. I'm not sure exactly the wording, but other communities, when you go buy your home, they have to pay for part of that. We haven't done that in my 16 years. So for 16 years, we've been doing somewhere between $3 to $5 million worth of capital projects, paying for them,
No assessments.
and no assessments, that's the word. So we're not assessing people when we go by and improve the sewers.
Okay, any questions on pages 12 and 13, the general fund revenues? Page 14, you have a pictorial, a pie graph showing what the various revenues percentages are. Let's move to the page 15, 16, 17, which is the ambulance and paramedic fees. I think the fire chief has put together this budget with the help of Mr. Hare. And if you look on page 17, it gives you a line graph of the fees, anticipating that we're going to be moving up to around about $810,000 worth of ambulance fees for this next year. Please understand that the ambulance cost more, but correct me on this, you will, but the ambulance, the whole paramedic ambulance process costs more than what we get. And a lot of that relates to Medicare and Medicaid, because the federal government only pays about 2/3, is it, or?
Yeah, it varies, but they never pay all of what you invoice. So, that's always one of those important parts. It wouldn't matter how much you invoiced on a per-call basis. You're never going to collect but what they say you're going to collect.
From those
Right.
two areas.
And as we all know, the state has been, it hasn't hurt us a lot, but the state has been significantly behind in making Medicaid, payments this year as well. So I believe the last time I saw that number was about $25,000 to $30,000 of what the state, in essence, owes us yet in those fees.
And if we look back from several meetings ago, there's been just a pretty steady increase in number of calls that are going out,
Correct.
over, so we've
Correct.
got to anticipate fees going up, but your expenses are going up too, so.
Right.
You can't make it up on volume on this.
And in fact, it's this volume of calls that tend to account for the most of the increases, meaning we run more calls that we can bill for. That's what makes the numbers go up more than what we collect on a per-call basis.
Okay. Any questions on those pages? Page 18, franchise fees. Basically, the franchise fee is a fee that we charge to whoever uses our right-of-way. Relates to telephone mostly, I think. Cable.
Cable, garbage, telephone, natural gas, all of those.
That's right, we charge ours.
We charge our, yeah,
Yeah, and Silco in their area.
we charge our.
Okay, this 2014, this revenue is projected to decrease by about $64,000 or 7.3% from last year's estimate. And Madam Controller, any reason why the potential decrease?
I think part of it has to do with, the gas. You know, we're just not using as much gas. I'm trying to think of what else.
The price of gas is down also.
Yeah.
Price is down, gas is down.
And the price of gas is down, so those revenues aren't up, and so it's 5% on that.
Okay. Page 19 is another line graph. Any questions on franchise fees? Okay, income tax. For fiscal year 2014, the revenue is projected to increase by $217,000 or 16.9%. I'm trying to think of what, we used to call this revenue sharing. This is the thing that our dear governor is trying to steal from us all the time.
Yeah, I can't,
Local government distributed funds?
yes.
That's it. There you go.
Yes.
That's why we hired you. This area here is in flux again this year, depending on the legislative season. And we could take a significant hit on this budget. So, and we won't know that until May, June. And so we'll have our budget, possibly maybe even have our ordinance completed before we know exactly what's going to happen with this one. So on page 20, that's a big question mark. Okay, that's 20 and 21. Page 22, natural gas utility tax for 2014, the revenue is projected to decrease by $96,000 again. Same reason, less
The
gas.
exact same as the.
Exact same
the other.
reason as the
Yeah,
franchise fee.
5%. Yeah.
People who buy furnaces that are 93% and people who use geothermal use less gas, bottom line. Okay, any questions on those? Property taxes, general corporate levy, and that general corporate levy would be about $675,000. That's just this one part of the property tax. That's increasing about 5%. The property values are not increasing. In fact, in some cases, they're decreasing. But Mr. Spangler, how many building permits about so far this year?
30-some
30-some?
for the year. Should be picking up.
Yep.
But last year was our second best year in 28 years, correct?
Yeah, last year we had 71 new house starts, and I think the previous best in the last 22 was like 73.
So when you,
Average is about
Probably
50 or so a year. For the past 35 years, basically, it's been about 1% of households.
Right.
but for the downturn of the economy, and we're sitting here, 71 is pretty good.
We have 3 subdivision extensions going on too right now in the works for this summer also, in 3 separate locations in Morton, so developers are developing still.
I think we have about 200 buildable lots.
Okay, move to page 26, sales tax. This page indicates where the sales tax goes to. The state of Illinois gets 5%. Village Morton, under the general sales tax, gets 1%. Village Morton, under the business district, gets 0.25%. Tazewell County general sales tax is 0.25%, and Tazewell County public safety tax, sales tax is 0.5%, for a total of 7%. And like I said, Washington, some of East Peoria is at 8%, while we're at 7%, and other portions of East Peoria that's in the business district is at 9%. So if you want to save 1% on everything, buy Morton. Any questions on this one? Simplified municipal telecommunications tax for this year is projected to increase by about $20,000 or 3.3%.
That's a tax on the cell phones, correct?
That's the tax on the phones.
And that was established a few years back when Mr. Leach discovered that was a legal tax, and I don't know what we'd do without that
That's
$600,000
$625,000.
that we've been
yeah.
getting for probably 8 years now. And I don't know how we'd do without it.
2002. All right. We move then to page 30. We move into the expenditures. If you look at the expenditures, and I'll go around the pie graph, personnel expenditures for the general fund is about 51%, or $5.17 million. Next largest is contractual services of 14% at $1.43 million. Then we're looking at commodities at 13%, that's $1.26 million. Other expenditures at 3% is $239,000. Capital outlay at about 13% is $1.33 million. Debt services is $638,000, is about 6%, and we have no contingency. The only debt service that we have is on the firehouse. There have been some questions about, was that the first time that we have ever borrowed? This community has borrowed since the early time of incorporation. It has had a practice of borrowing money. Okay, the next page. You can see how they're all broken down, and the expenditures broken down by the president and the board, paramedic department, street department, fire department, police department, public works, community development, administration, and board of fire and police commissioners. And then we break down our expenditures into our areas, which starts on page 32 with the president and the board of trustees. As of right now, that is on page 34. We have basically anticipated for 2014 for the president and trustees a total expenditure of $29,940. There's an increase of about $1,000 in travel and then we've kept the same for the training. Whenever there's a new mayor, there's training necessary, and there's travel for that training. So that was added. The other things are basically the same.
But I spoke to the treasurer today, Your Honor, and I discovered that our honorable mayor never turns in much travel expense in your 8 years, and I think the community owes you a thank you for that. We have that in the budget every year, and we've increased those expenditures for the new mayor coming on for training and that, but thank you for working 8 years and taking care of those bills.
Well, I was working 3 jobs at a time, so I felt I could afford it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up, but you certainly
Thank
didn't
you.
need to. You weren't supposed to tell him.
Sorry.
I asked a lot of questions the last couple of days.
I know. No, just.
Any questions on the board and the on the board and trustees? Okay, Board of Fire and Police Commissioners, do you want to explain a little bit of that, Madam Controller?
I think that Craig Hilliard could help me with this too, because he knows what some of more of these are. I mean, the salaries is for the board. We have 3 fire police commissioners. It seems like, Craig, what was it that every other year we seem to use a little bit more of this, and that's when you're going through your process?
Right. Our eligibility list is good for 2 years, and so every other year we have a higher expenditure for that testing process. We use a company which supplies the written test as well as scores those for us. In addition to that, we have certified personnel which deal with the physical portion of the test that they have to pass, so we've got to pay for those. There's additional expenditures which are included with other testing processes, polygraph examinations, physicals that have to be done. But again, it's a every other year thing that we're required. The list is only good for 2 years.
I'm not sure the average person understands that the fire and police commissioners, or the police commissioners, especially that part of it, are the ones who ones that hire the police officers, hire and fire, basically.
Right, they're actually the process for us that goes through the hiring and firing process for those, and they put in a lot of time. They're there at the they have a representative there at the written and the physical for the entire time. They did 20 interviews with members of the candidates, and it's a long process and they're not getting paid, you know, to do that. It's a volunteer service, and they do an outstanding job for us. And just to reiterate, we have about a week and a half, and we have 2 new recruits that will be graduating from the police academy next Thursday. So.
And those are replacements for
Those
people that are
are
lost.
replacements,
We're
yes.
not increasing any police officers on that.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, any questions on the fire and police commissioner? Administration, we have the information on page 39, 40, 41. 42. And if you look on page 39, at the bottom of the page, the major changes are on line 111-13-8300. That's $5,000 for replacement of 3 computer systems. Most of our computers are pretty old.
We rotate, just because they just seem to die on you, right in the middle. So we always kind of try to keep 2 to 3 in the budget just in case, because it seems like someone's is always dying. So that's what that's about.
Second one is a AED, automatic external defibrillator. We discussed this. We have a public building. Although the firehouse is fairly close, you never know when someone might drive up and say, "Do you have a defib for my husband?" And so we feel for safety of our people that not only the ones that are driving up, but the ones that are working there. For Roger, he's getting up there in age.
I will save you, because I have been trained.
I appreciate that.
I do not. You're lucky. I do not do mouth to mouth on anyone with a mustache.
Good.
We should note, though, that.
Okay, and the last item is IT.
Your Honor, the treasurer has something to say.
I'm sorry.
I should mention, though, that the paramedics did go through, and they are training all of our public works people. I think I've let most of you know. So I think we only have a handful of people that need to go through the training. So basically, everybody will be trained in CPR, and they'll all know, although the AEDs are fairly easy to use, everybody will have seen them. They'll know what to do in that case. I just think it's one of those things that we should mention, because I think everybody felt better about having that training.
Absolutely.
We're also applying for a grant that may help supply some AEDs, not that it should be taken out of the budget, but there might be some opportunities out there. And I also note that mouth-to-mouth they're kind of getting away from that, so you don't have to worry about that. At least do the compression part.
100 a minute, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And then the third thing is approximately $30,000 for IT upgrades, including the accounts receivable module and fixed asset module and website SEO optimization program.
I should mention the fixed asset management. That will, I believe, within time, you're going to have to give me a couple years probably, but that should help lower our audit costs, because the auditors right now are maintaining our fixed assets. They keep the schedule. They walk us through that. Well, this system will allow us, when we purchase something, Jessica will code it, she will put it through, and it'll hit the fixed assets. It'll be on our books right there for them, so they'll come in and do it. And we will get all of our information from them, download it to the system, so we should have a complete file there. Which they spend a great deal of time going through all of this stuff, whereas now they would, if we are to do this system, all they have to do is come in and check those invoices. So it should save us quite a bit.
Sounds like our general fund might go up again.
And any questions, changes on this, in this area? Okay, let's move forward then. We go into community development. Mr. Spangler and Mr. Newhouse.
I guess, as you know, I'm pretty tech savvy, so. We had in our budget this current year for a program for writing permits and tracking violations and that sort of thing. And we are in the process of getting all that information to the contractor that's going to do that project for us, and it's going to map up and hook up with.
It'll hook up with our accounting system.
So if we take in money, it'll be.
It'll be right there, and we don't have to do any extra work. It's just right there for us.
But we haven't had any expense for that yet, so, and we're not exactly sure how quickly they're going to get to us. So it's in the budget for this year, but other than that, and it's kind of the normal thing of, we don't know for certain how many permits we're going to write, whether it be electrical, plumbing. But I would say that a couple years ago, when we started doing electric, I didn't know if we'd write 100 of those permits in a year. And last year, we had about 220 some electrical permits. So there's a lot of work going on, and we should feel good that it's all getting inspected and it's being done properly. So, but in terms of the budget, I kind of plugged in numbers based on what we did last year, projected for this year, so I don't know where that might hit, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
So you've got about 3,000 for computer and other equipment, you got 6,000 for the geographic information system that we use, and then about 15,000 for the permit software that you were talking about.
Right.
And if I could highlight the GIS, if you remember last year, I asked for 78,000 spread across the departments. That was from the original flyover that was in 11, the 360-some thousand. Jeff Bettiger, our GIS, we're struggling to keep up with everything else, so we didn't spend the time we needed to get all that stuff finished. So once again, I'm asking for the remainder of that, which we only spent 20-some this year, which would be another 54,000. So you're going to see this 6,000 reoccurring in some of the other budgets, but it's still part of that original 360, and that kind of relates to when they did the flyover. So all the new aerial, we still have to do some work to touch up the line work to get it in the right spot. We always anticipated that. We just haven't finished it yet.
For those who don't know about the flyover, can you give us the reason why we do have a flyover and have pictures taken?
Yeah, it's basically updating. One of our biggest assets in Public Works is our GIS, Geographic Information System, and that's the way that we track, monitor all of our utilities. It helps with Julie locates, planning, everything, and these get done, every 10 years the aerials will get updated. So we actually tapped onto, it was an Illinois Department of Transportation flyover, so we got all that relevant updated aerials. So if anything changed in the last 10 years, it got updated here. We'll once again have to do that sometime down the road as things change, but very important to what we do here at the village with Public Works.
Thank you.
Your Honor, Mr. Spangler is probably being a little bit modest on the requirement on his time, but prior to having a tracking system and prior to the availability of the permit software, he did all of that work by hand. So that was all of the violations, all of the permits, all of the inspections, everything that required the attention of the planning and zoning officer had to be done by hand. This expenditure, I would guess, gains us at least a half a person, so that he is better able to direct his attention to the planning part of the job and be more proactive in managing. So this is highly valuable investment for the village.
And this stuff gets backed up now too. So
Right.
remember, if we had a fire or something,
Yeah,
all the
it's available.
information in Roger's head
Yeah.
with annexation fees, all that goes poof and it's gone. So now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, but it's being backed up, and if something bad happens, we don't have to jog Roger's memory.
So we,
But he can, in all seriousness, if I need something or we gotta find something, Roger usually knows where some of that old data is, or, with annexation fees and some of those old receipts, basically. So
we get a lot of bang for the buck from these expenditures.
Chief, can we put those paddles on his head and
There's
work
no
on his
evidence
memory?
to show that jog your memory, only your heart.
But if you spend any time at all in the village hall, the technology has just exploded in the last 2 years. What goes on in the treasurer's office, in the director's office, and ask for papers, and they just print them out, and they have printers handy, and it's just a whole different ballgame the last couple of years, and it's needed, and Roger's department needs that, and I would encourage any department head that needs it, we look at those. Those are wise investments.
Definitely. Okay, any changes, additions, subtractions, corrections? Let's move to Public Works then. That will be Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Laudermilk.
Yeah, basically, just to give you a brief summary, Public Works, there's basically 4 people in Public Works as a part of this budget item, and that's the administrative assistant, which is shared with zoning and planning, the chief mechanic, the GIS manager, and myself. So no changes to that. And then to highlight some of the, I guess, major items, is the chief mechanic's requesting a digital wheel balancer, which is about $3,500. And then also the $6,000 that I mentioned before on the GIS. That's really the major changes, and that budget's down. That's down about $42,000 from last year.
Any other questions, changes, recommendations? All right, let's move over to the police department. I think this is Mr. Belsley and the chief.
We'll do a tag team here with Craig. I want to just hit some highlights here, and then I'll ask Craig to fill in the blanks on some of this. But back to his comments earlier with the 2 new officers that are in training right now. They were hired at the end of last year. They're finishing up on 12 weeks of training at the State Police Academy in Champaign, and will be finishing up at the end of this month. But going into this next fiscal year, this will be the first time that we'll have the full slate of officers as allotted by the board since 2001.
I think the last time that I can remember that, we actually sat about 2003-05 when we had authorized a 23rd member only because we had one officer that had committed to retiring while another officer was over in the Gulf serving. And but it's been quite some time. Injuries and has been the large part of that, and just natural transition of officers leaving. But it's the first time in many years that we will have been on full staff.
Yeah. And I think just with, as referenced earlier this evening, the number of activities that are going on around town with approximately 42 tourism-related activities brings a lot of people through the community. More crime, more activity. The numbers, as we've seen, have gone up, so there's definitely a need for more staffing in that regard, and glad to see that we're up to full speed with regard to the number of officers we have out there. With regard to new equipment, in the commodities line, 6120, the majority of the $15,000 that's in that line, 11,000 of that, 5,000 will go towards replacing a live scan piece of equipment, and that's literally fingerprint scanning.
Right, that's fingerprint scanning. We have had the one that we're presently using since we moved into the facility in October of 2004. Come the end of this calendar year, it's no longer going to be serviced and maintenance, so we have to get a replacement. And by ordering it before the 31st of May, we get $1,000 back. So it'll be one of the first purchases that we're making in the fiscal year.
And under capital outlay, under special projects, line 8700 is, or excuse me, 8900 is $22,000 that we budgeted, and these are for improvements to the target practice range that's out north of the community on Veterans Drive, Veterans Road. And this is something that I think is sorely in needs. The range, we don't have, roughly the best dates or information that we have for the improvements goes back to the 1970s when the original targets and a compressor were installed. The compressor was replaced in the 1980s, and that's the one that we're still using currently today. And this is for the automation of moving the targets out there. So that's been held together, I think, with baling wire and tape, but
Both
and then,
literally and figuratively.
yeah, yeah. And then in the 90s, we actually had metal frames out there that are the holder of the targets itself. And those were actually put together, I understand, by an auxiliary squad member that fabricated them himself and installed them. So it really needs a major makeover to bring it up to the standards required of today. And with that, there's a number of changes, replacing the mechanical equipment, the control systems, the target holders itself, a new air compressor, and upgrades to the outdoor lighting. So not only can the range be used more, get more hours of use, hopefully out under different conditions, day and nighttime conditions.
Right, one of the things that we do in our training is we have officers that work during the night, and we do intermittent lighting, both with the light from the oscillating lights on the squads to some backlighting on the targets, front lighting on the target, and a variation of lighting, which gives our officers the training which they need to do their jobs.
Under vehicles, we have typically we've followed the trend that we've done the last couple of years is we're on a rotating basis. We replace 3 vehicles each year. We're continuing that this year as well. $26,000 per vehicle is budgeted for that, $78,000 total. But then in addition, there's a 4th vehicle also that's been added, and that's for the budget item of new K-9 unit that the department is requesting. And in addition to the vehicle that needs to be specially equipped for transporting the animal and for that specific use, also there's $23,000 that are budgeted for the initial startup and implementation of that K-9 unit. And I've asked Craig with that, that's $49,000 in new cost, and the department is definitely supportive of this and has a desire to see this take place. But I've also asked him to go back as a good steward and to look at what kind of cost savings we can capture in the budget. And with that challenge, he went back and he did reduce the budget, the overall budget, by an equivalent amount, $49,000. Actually, it was $49,125, I think, that he is able to reduce the budget by to show his interest and the high priority that he has on the implementation of the K-9 unit. I guess with that, I'll also, I guess for the benefit of the board, have Craig maybe provide a little more insight to the need for the K-9 unit.
I think we last, some of us here were with the village when we last had a K-9 unit. One of our officers, who was the K-9 handler, left in January of 2001. And with that went our K-9. We'd had it for about 5 years prior to that. It is a good public relations tool as well as a tool to use for officers for drug arrest. During 2011-2012, our drug arrests increased by 24%. That's the arrest that we made because we caught them. That's not saying what got away, that we may have been able to get had we had a dog. Right now, it's the rule of thumb of the courts that you have to have a dog on scene for a walk around on a vehicle within 20 minutes. Otherwise, you're unlawfully detaining them. We've utilized other agencies' dogs to come and assist and support us, but we're contingent on them having a dog on duty. We're contingent on them, even if they have a dog on duty, being available to come, and then to be able to respond within the 20-minute time frame. In addition to that, we utilize the dog. It's a multi-purpose dog. It's not just for drugs, but it does tracking. In the event that anyone's lost, it does searches, area searches. A dog can search in about a 20-minute time frame, the same time that it takes an officer to search for 2 hours. We have areas that we need to secure in any urgent matter. That dog can go in and take care of that situation. I asked one of my officers who worked on a K-9 project for his master's to do some of the research for me, and he's here to answer any questions that any of the board members may have regarding that, and it's Officer Matt McElhoe. In addition, I have Officer Kristen Falk here, who served as a canine officer for 2.5 years with another police agency, who can respond also to any benefits of the canine program.
Thank you for putting it in the budget. I think it's time that Morton had their own police dog for drugs and all the other events. And it's well overdue, and I'm glad we can finally afford to do it.
One thing that I would tell the board is that the budgeted amount of $26,000 is hopefully an inflated number. The Chevy Impala was determined to not be made after 2013. We can't get a guarantee whether or not they're going to make it or not. We're talking about $4,000 per car if they go ahead and do that. So, overall that would be a $16,000 savings on the village if that in fact is the case.
I like to think of it as a conservative number rather than inflated.
Chief, would that be, how many people would be trained then to hand, would it be one officer?
It would be one officer.
Or one dog?
Would be trained, yeah. The dogs only listen to one person. For those of us who have pets, you'll often see that same thing.
Or not.
Even in family.
Or kids.
I would point out that when I was superintendent of schools, we had 1 or 2 people on the roof of Jefferson School, and brought the dogs in, didn't even have to take the dogs up the ladder. They gave up like you wouldn't believe, scared to death. And so there's no question they are effective. They really are effective. I know that dog scared me when it was in the car. And so
that is their domain. And
yes. I would ask the question though, Mr. Belsley. I think we had a survey of the community not too long ago. Was there a listing of important things that people would like to have seen for the?
Greg.
Great. If you remember last summer, we brought back to you a Morton resident, Benji Cashdollar, had done part of his master's thesis a survey of the village, and in reference to the police department. The number one median value concern for the citizens of Morton that responded to this was 26.1% was that their number one concern was drugs. And this is a response to that and showing them what we are doing about drugs.
Okay. Any questions on that budget? Increases, decreases? I would only offer that, although I have no say-so in this budget other than the next few weeks, if we budget this amount, and I realize that taking almost $50,000 out of your budget to do this is a significant amount. That if you are conservative on these things, that you would come back to Mr. Belsley, and if you needed something and there was money that was within that budget, that you could use it for other things. And I think that's what you've done in the past. But $50,000 out of the budget is rather significant, and you did a fantastic job of getting that done.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Fire Department, which would be Chief and Mr. Hare.
Okay. We had very few changes in the fire department budget overall. In fact, I don't believe that there was any significant changes in either the contractual or the commodities type areas. And if there were, they were related to just fixed increases that are kind of beyond our control. In the capital outlay, we did put $15,000 in the building line item, so that would be line item number 8200. That would be for the eventual some design development as we get into looking at a new fire station. There's no hard timeline for that. It may or may not be spent in this fiscal year, but I thought it was wise to have a little bit of money so that if we wanted to get started down that path, I, of course, don't want to wait until the last minute to get that done. The $25,000 in equipment is for two items, both of which you saw last year. That is to add one more of the traffic preemption Opticon systems. This is another one that would go along North Morton Avenue. You've seen these for the last, 4 or 5 years, I believe. And frankly, what we're trying to do is get a pathway down North Morton Avenue. Obviously, as that has grown, we start to run into 5, 6, 7 traffic lights as we would go from, either direction from Jackson on out North Morton or the other way in. So this will help, and especially through the interstate project, give us that corridor. And the other is a project that we started last year, is $10,000 for replacing air pack bottles that have a service life to them. That will be expiring, that we originally purchased back on a grant a few years ago. So we're replacing 10 of those bottles for, this will be the second of a 4-year project to do that. And then the vehicles line item is the same number that you saw last year that was approved for a tanker, primarily for a tanker. We just is not one of those items that we are going to be able to get done and purchased in the current fiscal year. So it again shows up in the next fiscal year. And that's money that would again come out of our depreciation fund, which doesn't show up on this budget, but through the treasurer and doing transfers, we would be funding again at the same level that we've done for the last, again, 3 or 4 years. So I believe that those are all the significant changes.
Chief, I've had some questions about the firehouse that 5 years from now. The major questions that I keep hearing is this new firehouse facility going to be the same as the one as number one north of town? Is it going to cost as much? Can you give me a minute or two?
Sure. You'll remember that a lot of what we did in building the first firehouse as a headquarters station, that we call it, was to support the administrative functions of the department, the ambulance billing and everything that we talk about, offices, training element, and have a place for our training and the firefighters to go into, none of which, of course, needs to be duplicated. So any future firehouses from here on out would not have those components, would be more a factor of a response station. It's a place to keep fire trucks and personnel and hoses and those types of things. In fact, there's even a few of those, few things like a hose dryer, or we have an air compressor that fills our packs that won't be needed too. So there are a number of things that will not have to be duplicated. I wish I could tell you right off top of my head what that's going to cost. I can't, but I can tell you it will be less expensive than the other.
So in your mind, 3 stalls, maybe 4 stalls, or?
Yeah. I'm thinking that it'll be 3 and maybe actually 3.5. One that was not a drive-through at this point that we could put the ambulance in. But of course, we do need to be able to house everything that's in the station now, which is a 4-stall into the new one. Right. So none of that really goes away. But it wouldn't be significantly added to either in terms of that parking space.
And also residence for paramedics.
That's right, yes.
So a lot smaller, smaller station, a lot smaller cost.
And we even I don't want to say overbuilt, but we added in extra space for the eventuality of more personnel staying at the firehouse. And again, we would not have as many of those spaces at an outstation as we would the other station.
And we have a layout of that from the fire study. I have it in my other.
Right.
So we kind of know approximately how big that is, and we have an 1.5 acre bought, so it's not going to be that large a facility.
Right. There was a grant opportunity a few years ago where we hurried together some basic information so that we could apply for that grant. We unfortunately didn't get that grant, but it does give us a great jumping off point for what we need, where we're going with it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple, the tanker truck, we discussed last year that we were maybe going to buy a used one or something. Is there any possibility of something like that? Or
We had what we thought was going to be an opportunity from another community that was looking at getting rid of one. Their board decided not to do that, and so that didn't come to fruition.
Okay.
I can tell you that there's been a group of firefighters that have been kind of working on this project for some time, and they've kind of come up with some different ideas that at some point I'll be able to ready to present in terms of getting smaller vehicles than what we would even be replacing. So I think that there'll be some things there, but that's also part of the reason we haven't been able to finish it off this
Right,
year.
but I think we need to look at some of that, because as we look at building this new firehouse and the amount of money that it's going to take, and without adding more debt and a lot of debt, I think that tanker truck is something we could probably maybe drive till it quits. Because I doubt if you're going to get much for it.
No, I wouldn't.
You know,
anticipate
and
to
we're
get-
doing that with some other equipment, and when we're looking, we're gonna have to start this fire station within a couple of years, major money. If we could maybe leave that in the budget, but not spend it, I mean, that's could be a big chunk of getting this building done, especially if you can come up with a smaller piece, because that tanker is mainly for fires out in the country, I would think, or large-scale fires.
Right. It would be for areas that are non-hydrogen. There are some areas like the trailer park in town, so I hate to say it's all out of town, because it's not, but non-hydrogen areas.
We had a long discussion on it last year, I just can't remember it
Yeah,
all.
right.
So, all right.
Okay, any additions, subtractions, changes?
The other item I had, Your Honor, was this fire prevention officer we have in the budget. I would just soon not fill that position. I would like to see that sublet out or get the fire chief the education to do it. I don't think we have been keeping one full-time, and that's quite an expenditure. And I'd like to look at some other avenue of having just a full-time staff.
Okay, well, you want to discuss that with Mr. Hare and the chief then? And-
I think we just need to look at it because the fire budget has been extreme. We got to probably, I would guess this new structure will be somewhere close to 2 million. And I think for that much money in that fire department, we need to look at some cost-cutting measures.
We're outsourcing that function now, are we not? Hiring.
I've been doing it to the best of my ability. We haven't filled it, I haven't filled it, because I think that there might be an opportunity to do it as a part-time, not a full-time job. But of course, that takes the right timing, the right person, and you know, that's looking for that kind of employment. In the meantime, we haven't done it. What I haven't been able to do, I've been trying to keep up with Roger and all his building that he throws at us, but we haven't been able to go out into the community and do any inspections, so.
But I've
Joe,
heard
did-
you have been keeping up.
Right, Joe.
I've been trying.
Joe, we had looked at also a while back a cross-function person. So, you know, that's something that we had looked at. They would have additional duties besides that so that you would have savings, you know, in that part of it. So there's.
Well, you know, we took the wage study, and most communities this size has 117 people. We have 83.
Right.
Because a lot of people wear several hats. And I just see maybe this one here, again, as another position.
exact- yeah, absolutely.
That maybe we could wear a couple hats and save a large expenditure.
Yeah, in fact, the job.
At least look at it.
We had worked on a job, or Joe had worked on a job description for that, so.
I would only offer that if you're going to contract it, in the past, we contracted some of this, and the responsiveness was a problem to some of our builders. So if you do go the contract route, then you definitely need to have something in the agreement on how quickly they will respond.
It kind of tends to become a less personal service, if you will, because obviously a contractor has lots of communities that they do. So when our local contractor wants to stop into the firehouse and talk about this, which happens all the time, then you have to say, well, I can't talk to you about it. You've got to call so-and-so in some other city. And that obviously doesn't always go over very well, so.
You know, my chief interest in it, as you know, is from the planning and zoning standpoint, where we worked very well together in the past for the benefit of the community and cleaned up a couple of trouble spots. and, you know, having somebody available, and obviously with new business or large-scale residential construction, apartment building or something like that, some real importance in having somebody available. I defer to Trustee Hare and to you on recommendation, but from my point of view, it's valuable to have that service in some form that we can bring online when we need it and work with Mr. Spangler.
Okay, anything else on the fire? Let's move over to paramedics.
Again, there was very few changes in that particular budget. I believe most of the changes were, again, related to personnel costs, which always fluctuate, of course. And there were few, if any, changes in the commodities or contractual services. The only item that we have in the capital projects is again the continuation of an ambulance purchase, which was approved last year, would not be purchased in the current fiscal year, would be purchased in the next fiscal year. So there were no other items in capital expenditures for that paramedics.
Any comments on the paramedics changes? Let's move over to the street department. Mr. Kaufman, Mr. Laudermilk?
Yeah, in the street department, we finally, in the personnel, we finally took out the extra man we've had in that budget probably for 8 years. We've decided to take it out. The superintendent, Engel, he decided it's not necessary, so that's been taken out of the personnel. As you look at contractual services, we have the mowing expense. We have the grounds where there's 37,000. 10 of that is for trees. 27 of that is for mowing. Sidewalks, we have in there 55,000, and that's for some sidewalks. 10,000 for slab jacking, and we're going to start replacing some curbs ahead of the street. We used to always do the curbs always with the streets, and we're finding we've resurfaced streets and everything, and our curbs are 50 years old, and our pavement's 10, and where there's areas in town now that we need to get to the curbs. So we got 25,000. I had the director add another 10,000 of that. We were originally at 45. We have 55 in there because of the areas we need to get caught up on that a little bit. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ken.
and with our overlay project, we're running into that period where some of our curbs are bad, so we're trying to stay out in front of that overlay problem. One project would be Wick Street in between First and Main Street. We did last year. We had some extra monies, and we went in and slipped that, and the contractor worked with our guys to get that done and really saved a lot of money. So I'd encourage somebody to even look at that project.
And what Craig means by that is we tore it out from corner to corner and did it with a machine where we could get a lot more curb done, and then all the city had was to patch the blacktop, and it really went slick, and that happens to be on the route that the bicycle race was, and those curbs were in terrible shape. So we thought we'd try that section once, and we think we can do that in other areas where we're doing some of these projects, and then we'll give them another few feet there where they can use the slip form and get more curb done. So that's what that is. And then the maintenance on the others, we have the bridge inspections and some bike trail planning. We've got 25,000 budget so we can stay ahead of planning these bike trails ahead of time. And then the 46,000 there is for Julie locates and GIS and some miscellaneouses. And down in the commodities, we have the concrete forms of 15,000. That's where we put a little bit more money in that because the street department themselves is going to be doing some sidewalk repairs.
Yeah, we do some of our own. I'm pushing the street superintendent, some of his guys. Our guys do a really good job with sidewalks. Do a little bit of curb here and there, but that's similar to the one up above where my guys will be able to do probably I think that number there is about 1,000 foot of 5 foot wide sidewalk that will be done in-house and save a significant amount of money.
Then we're probably looking at some of the equipment we're going to be looking at. We have an old kettle. I think it's 99 kettle, and we're thinking that is gonna have to, usually we run that stuff till it quits. We're thinking this year might be the year it quits. So we're talking about replacing that. We have an 89 compressor, which we've had in the budget, run it till it quits. I believe the gas department, in their budget coming up, they're requesting a new one. And we're thinking about maybe if we could maybe possibly keep that one and ours. If one dies, whichever one dies first, we can let go, and then Mike would like to have the other one for backup, because we're not going to get much for it. We'd have an extra backup, so we're hoping we don't have to spend that $15,000. The big expenditure, the $140,000 for the truck number 15, is the old one, Sterling single axle frontline snow plow. It actually went into service in March 2000. It's the last of our big trucks with a metal bed that's rusting out. And we're finding the beds don't last as long as the trucks, but they don't make Sterlings anymore, so we're kind of worried about parts. So we thought we'd put that one in here this year, because I believe the gas or one of the other departments is going to have one more of those in the future. But once this truck is replaced, the other 3 trucks in that department all have aluminum beds, and I think now we try to get 15 years of life out of them. I think we might be able to go a little bit longer, because the beds won't be out. The beds will not, the beds will outlast the trucks now. So that's that, and that's really all there is in the street department as far as expenditures. Craig, is there anything else you want to talk about? The GSI, I guess you got that in
GIS, that's that recurring 6,000 that I mentioned before. That comes up to a grand total of 54,000. And then a computer in there for the superintendent. His is really old, so it's time to upgrade that. Now I got to get him to use it, just like Roger. So.
Any changes on street department? Hearing none. Tourism, so Mrs. Yarko, Mr. Piles.
I'll let Susan give more detail. The budget is basically 20,000 less than last year if you take out a few pieces of equipment that are going to be purchased just because of the tourism office downtown. We're going to have a defibrillator purchase for that building, and also an outdoor lightning alert system, because if we have a lot of people in that area and there's lightning in the area, we need to evacuate and make sure people are safe. So those 2 pieces of equipment basically are the difference in the budget. It would be down lower, 20,000 less without that. Plus we have sidewalks in there out by Ashland, and so we are going to have a few more expenses for having the building, the office downtown. So we appreciate Susan being housed in the police station, but she's going to have her own space now, so there will be some maintenance on the building. Is there anything you want to add to that? Anything?
Just a reminder that all of this is funded by the hotel motel tax.
And that's what we have to use. That money has to be designated for items that bring non-resident visitors to our community. And that funds that budget.
And I like the way you said that, non-resident visitors to our community. That does not necessarily mean direct relationship to hotel nights. It's visitors to our community. We receive money from the hotel nights, but that's not restricted to just that.
But during the state basketball tournament, I bet most of our hotels were probably sold out. Yeah.
It's good.
The 55,000 too on Ashland, you'll see that on last year's budget too. So that's my fault it wasn't done. There are some issues with utilities and right of way that we're hopefully going to get those in this year. That'll be a tremendous improvement there for some of the hotels to be able to get around.
That's
Get to
the
the
hotels that are on Ashland, so that there can be a walk around sooner or later up to Walmart.
Haven't determined which side yet, but probably the north side. But I just want to highlight that's not Susan's. That's my deal that I
It's
didn't
your
get
fault.
that done. So we're working on it.
More good work from tourism.
Any other changes on tourism? Okay. Let's move to gas distribution, page 73.
Do you want to?
You want to take it away?
Our salaries are up a little bit just with longevity. But we need a fireproof file cabinet and replacing a compressor that's 20 years. We have 3 compressors that are 20 years old and some IT and website upgrades, but it's fairly a flat budget. You want to give some more detail?
Yeah, on the personnel, I just want to highlight that we are one man down. Kind of working through that with Superintendent Stidman, and we may hire that person this year, depending on workload and some of that. So we'll be looking into that, but I did want to highlight what these guys get done with, well, 9, if you add the water guys, water distribution guys, but what we get done with 9 guys is pretty impressive. And then some of the equipment, same thing. We are going to replace the 95 air compressor, which is 20,000 in there. That was a use it till it drops, but it's ready to go.
Dropping.
And that one's going to have a little more pressure on that due to some of the things the guys do on testing the gas lines. A couple other smaller items, a $2,000 explosion-proof blower, and that's something that the fire department can use also. If you guys have any questions too, Scott can give you a little more detailed. But that's basically to suck the natural gas out of if the fire department is to use it, suck the natural gas out of the house or out of any confined area.
I thought that was part of our bomb squad's equipment. It's not.
It's the gas guys. $3,000 compactor. Once again, the $6,000 from the GIS. And then just to highlight the $30,000 for the IT and website upgrades. You've heard the $30,000 before. I was going to highlight it then, but some of those upgrades to some of those modules, and Wendy can expand more on that. That's included in some of these other budgets too. It wasn't just $30,000. But one of the things that I'm working with Wendy on is some of our sending invoices out and keeping tabs on those things too. Something we're really working hard on to keep tabs.
And we get an automated process where we can actually look things up, make sure it's paid with sequential numbers and all of that. It'll just make it smooth, because right now, I think when Craig started, what we ran into is he was trying to find a bill that Bob had done probably a year before, and we found it was very hard to locate it because we don't have a system. They're just put on a Word document and sent out. So Craig and I, as we talked back then, we talked about it, and I think now that we've kind of both settled in, we could look at this and say, okay, now it's really time to get this kind of started. It'll make it easier in general all over the office.
My guys do a lot of T&M, a lot of time and material work, so it's very key to get that stuff in the system and then send it out, but we're just trying to be a little more organized with that as we send it out and as we track it after. So that's part of those improvements. That's about all I have at this point, unless you guys have any questions on projects or...
Any changes? All right, let's move on to water. Wastewater.
Wastewater. This is Ginger, and Ginger's not here, so I will go through this. As far as personnel, we're the same personnel out there. As you can see on the salaries, they're a little bit up. That's just your normal increases. as we go down through the list, there's not a lot of changes in the contractual services, pretty much same as it has been. I think we found a little bit of savings possibly in some of the utilities as you look down there on item 5710. I think you're starting to see some of those savings in the efficiencies, plus some of our contracts with Noble America, Ameren, some of those things, we're starting to see some of those savings. So we did drop that in the budget. In commodities, not a whole lot of changes in there from last year. Capital outlay in equipment, we do have in there budgeted. We've been looking at the last few years, and Superintendent Roker can speak on behalf of this some more too, but one of our biggest assets on the wastewater side, and you'll see this as we get into capital projects, is televising our sewers. We televise a quarter of them per year. We've been lining sewers for 19 years now, which way ahead of the game with surrounding communities. But one of the key tools as a part of that is the camera. We are in need of upgrading that camera. So as you see in that budget, that cost about $105,000 for that camera. I have some information here if you guys would like to see some more on that, but we're asking for that. In addition, we're also asking for $15,000, basically a utility vehicle, like a proprietary stuff here, but John Deere Gator, similar to that, a utility vehicle. That's something we've been in need of. We've been actually renting those out. That could be used for multiple departments, but mostly we'll use that to get down and monitor our trunk lines. And then also we plan on keeping our old camera and hopefully coming up with a trailer to put that on so we can start televising some of our important trunk lines that we can't get to with our camera now. If you've seen looks like a panel truck driving around, that's our camera. We can't get that off-road. So this will help with that. But multiple departments should be able to use that utility vehicle, including tourism. Any questions on that?
Promise to keep it off railroad trestles.
Well, it's got to look nice if we're going to use it down at the plaza.
Just one comment. I'm pretty sure that most people know what you're talking about. But for those who might be watching and don't, when you talk about televising, you're talking about the use of a special TV camera that explores the pipeline so that we can find faults and conduct maintenance, correct?
Yes. Some of our guys, they spend 75% of their time televising sewers. And the biggest thing is trying to catch this stuff before it's a problem. Sorry, wrong terminology. The thing you got to realize is with sewers, they're typically 10 foot deep. They're some of our most expensive repairs. So if we can catch these ahead of time, it not only helps with lining, it helps with determining when our capital projects need to go. So it's a huge tool on the planning side too. So we would definitely like to purchase that this year and keep staying ahead of the game on our sewers. Next, you'll see the GIS again at $6,000 in there. That's about it with the major changes.
Any changes? Water distribution.
Basically a flat budget again, except for some equipment purchases, backhoe and the air compressor. Our salaries are down $4,500, just having newer hires and not having the longevity. Other than that equipment, the difference is $61,000. That's basically those two pieces of equipment. I know, Craig, you can expound on that.
Yeah, so we're on equipment here. Once again, the use it till it drops, the $15,000. We have a compressor there. All of our compressors are 20-plus years old. Then we have $45,000 for our tractor loader backhoe. That's part of our 5-year buyback on our backhoes. So last year was gas, I believe. This year's water distribution. So we have 4 of those. Every 5th year, it basically gets bid out again. In vehicles, we would like to replace number 26. That's a 2003 Ford 350 Super Duty truck. That's used by our utility locating, our utility techs. So that's in need. We definitely like to upgrade that. Got 6,000 from the GIS again, recurring.
Same number of people.
And that's about all I have at this point. We have, our guys work on specific projects throughout the year, upgrading things, so there's a 95,000 line item there on 8,500. There's 5 projects that they'll be working on also. Any questions?
Any changes? Okay, water treatment.
Water treatment, basically the same personnel, hasn't changed, so you'll see a little increase on salaries just from the normal increases. Right off the bat in contractual services, I got 145,000. You'll see that's a significant change from last year. I put this in here. This isn't a capital improvement, but these are some of the fixes that need to be made to water treatment plant number 1, which is by the old fire station there on Plum, and then plant number 3 off Detroit. The plant off Detroit, we're trying to get some of the piping that's underground, above ground, inside the plant there. Main reason when we're operating at peak capacity, if we have a problem, and Lon, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we have a problem, we're in trouble. So we want to be able to get to those pipes if we can get to them, if we had a leak or something like that. And then number 1's replacing some old valves. And so those 2 projects there total about $125,000. But I put them in contractual just because they're existing piping instead of capital. Going down the line, you'll see a little bit, same as wastewater, a little bit decrease on the utilities due to some efficiencies and some of the lower costs on some of our utilities. Not a lot of changes through commodities. Special capital projects, you'll once again see the 30,000 on the website and IT upgrades, and then also, once again, the recurring 6,000 for GIS. And that's about all I have as far as major changes to that. Overall, that budget's up about 62,000 over last year.
Changes? Stormwater.
Stormwater. Salaries have increased a little bit. Basically, there's 1 employee there, Jamie, engineering technician, but some of our other duties from other departments go towards that. So we have some personnel for mowing, the creeks, sweeping. Some of those salaries go towards that, so that's why you see a little bit of an increase. We are spending a little more time with, we've switched one employee's duties to start working on some of the planning for some of the storm sewer. We've done a really good job on wastewater and some of the sanitary sewers, but we're trying to get caught up on some of the storm, finding stuff out in the existing system and tying that in with the GIS. So a little more time is being spent towards the stormwater department, so that's why that number's up. As you go down through there, there's not a lot of changes in the contractual. I will highlight a couple things. Prairie Creek, same as last year. We haven't spent a whole lot of money out of that, but we do have 18,000 under line item 5330, which is engineering services. That's just being proactive. We really need to start studying that as development heads to the south. So we're trying to stay on top of some of those things. Another one that I would like to highlight, in the garbage disposal, 5715, we take our street sweepings to Indian Creek landfill, which is managed by PDC. So as part of our waste collection contract, they gave us a significant credit there. So you'll see a $6,000 savings on our street sweepings as they go to the landfill. On to commodities. Not a lot of changes with commodities. Distribution and collection system, we have 135 in there. We had that last year. That's just keeping up with some of our regional basins. One of the big ones we didn't get to last year is the regional detention basin off Detroit, which is a big part of the future Detroit widening project back there behind Fort Transfer. That's something where we're trying to increase the volume and just really change that to give some more added capacity as we move forward towards the widening of Detroit. And then also, once again, we got IT upgrades. That's the fourth item, including administration, so that totals $120,000 for IT and website upgrades. And then also the reoccurring $6,000 for GIS. That's all I have there. The budget is up from last year about $7,000. So pretty close to the same.
Any changes? Okay, turn to page 100. We have the Public Works capital projects. Just wanted to remind you that some of these will still change around yet this year. So it may not occur exactly as we see this here. But if the board is willing to without action, tentative, or have a consensus on a tentative agreement on this tentative budget, Mr. Laudermilk can go forward and request bids for the work that he has to get done. So we have a consensus on that?
Concur.
Okay.
And if I could highlight just a couple
Go right
items
ahead.
on there. Like I said, Washington Street, I got approval for that tonight. Reason being, that's a very big project, so I'm needing a little extra time before school's out. So I'm working with the school's bus supervisor of buses to get that going a couple weeks earlier, so we don't miss the end date. But some of the other items I'd just like to highlight on there. The bulk water dispensing station. This is something I'm working on with Superintendent Allman. I think this is a need that the village has, and we see it as a way to generate an additional revenue, especially contractors, maybe even farmers. But basically, this would be a bulk water facility. Right now, we don't really have an approved means for anybody to get bulk water. We've had to make some agreements with certain contractors when they directional bore. A lot of these contractors need water. I-74, 155, there'll be water for dust control, for a lot of different items. But it's going to cost us about $100,000 to construct this. Pretty simple construction. But we see paying off that $100,000 just with the revenue from that within a year and a half. So anything after that would be revenue that we'd be generating. So I think that's an item I wanted to highlight is some of my departments being proactive, trying to find other means of revenues. West Queenwood Lift Station. We did a lift station last year on Jackson. This one's on West Queenwood and is in need of some repair. So that'll be another significant improvement to the sanitary system. Veterans Road Bike Trail, you saw this on last year. I didn't get it done in time. We got towards the end of the year and it got cold. So this project's going to start really soon. And this is something that at the end, the Park District will maintain and own, but it runs out there along Veterans past Westwood Park and eventually connects up to Stoneway and Thorn Ridge. So that's a significant improvement to our bike trail system to be able to get to Thorn Ridge and some of those other neighborhoods out there.
And it's a grant. There's
And it's a grant.
$100,000 grant.
We have a
for that.
$100,000 grant. Thank you. And then also on there's the engineering for the Detroit Avenue project. As I talked about, that's slated for 2016 right now. Might have a chance of moving up to 2015, but that's the engineering to continue that project.
Is that lift station as deep as the one we did over by Kmart?
No.
Didn't the one at Kmart cost about $250,000?
Yes. 270. This one's a little more significant.
This one is our largest capacity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Due to the FC 98.
And it's got, just briefly, I mean, it'll have like a precast structure, but it's more of a box structure than the manholes on the other ones. So although the other one was deeper, this one's got a little more.
But there's safety issues here too.
Not as many safety issues as the other one. This is more just.
This is more of a, I think it's one of our oldest, and like I said, it's our highest capacity, our most critical, and we're upgrading size to meet some future development that way.
Could you explain, Phil, what area this takes?
Well, it takes, everything west of 155, north, on that Route 98 corridor, and could potentially take as far south as
Okay.
And it does take some stuff east also.
yeah, the field shopping centers.
So it's got a
Quite a bit.
significant amount of flow to it.
Thank you.
All of Detroit Street.
Thank you.
Okay, anything on Public Works capital projects? Let's move to, we got information, nothing on gas depreciation fund. We have water depreciation fund at 2014, FY 2014, the revenues over expenditures will be about $1 million.
That's where we set aside 30% of our water sales into this each year.
Set aside 30%
Of the water revenue that we take in, we set aside 30% of it each month to accommodate future capital.
that way we can do it without bonding.
Yes.
Okay, stormwater depreciation fund. You see that on page 105? Any comments on that?
Stormwater depreciation, 45% gets put away of those revenues, which goes towards capital projects, and that does include items like curb and gutter, anything related to storm sewer, manholes, sewer, but it does include curb and gutter also.
Motor fuel tax fund?
I just wanted to highlight motor fuel. Go ahead, Wendy. I just wanted to highlight that as we plan for some of these other projects, we have been spending the engineering using general fund, but we do save this money for projects like Detroit. And I will say that Morton has always been proactive in having the monies available to plan for these big projects that we get grants through PUATs. So a couple of the projects in line here would be the widening of Detroit to 5 lanes. And then also the Main and Jackson intersection, which will happen similar timing once it's funded. So we're projecting 3 years from now to have, 3 million in there. So we will definitely be able to fund those projects with PUATs to get them done. So just want to highlight that we're being proactive and keeping that money aside so those projects, when they come up, Morton can fund their portion, which they've always been able to do that.
And PUATS is federal money for roads.
Yes, typically that's a 70% match is the max, so not Main and Jackson intersection would be IDOT, but like Detroit is a PUATS, they would fund 70%, and we would fund the other 30. But part of that's having your money ready to go when those projects go. So we do have plenty of room in there to get those, very large projects completed and paid for.
Okay, business district.
That is just, the revenue part is just, we conservatively, I say we take in about $30,000 a month on that. In terms of what we will spend, we have some maintenance to the ground we'll have to do, possibly some planning, so other professional services kind of planning if we do this plaza. The grant program, I've kept that in there at 50,000 for the facade grants, even though this year we were less. Kind of hoping to see more applicants for next year.
Any questions on that one? Changes? IMRF, FICA.
This is just, we get this, in terms of revenue, this is the money that we levy from taxes. Part of the 1.8 million that you saw in the property taxes in the general fund, then we transfer it over to the IMRF fund to fund the IMRF and FICA for all general fund employees. Any of the departments in the general fund, we levy taxes for their pensions, basically. So what you'll see is there are departments just like there are departments in the general fund, and that's just for their pensions. So they're covered.
Any questions? Fire and paramedic equipment depreciation?
That's we set aside 180,000 a year from fire and 50,000 a year from paramedic departments. We just transfer that kind of as a savings, sort of like we do for capital projects to save for bigger purchases, ambulances and fire trucks.
Okay. Disaster recovery?
That we keep that 150,000 in there, and we just keep it in there and hope there's never a disaster.
Okay. Building addition?
This is just a possibility, just setting some money aside as we kind of grow bigger and bigger at some of our places, the possibility of having to add on. So we've been setting aside $200,000 a year since last year.
Fireman pension?
This is basically, we pay our firefighters a pension when they retire. I'm tired and I can't remember the age because they come for it, but it's $5 a year for each year of creditable service, so it's minimal. We basically can cover the pensions right now with the money that we bring in for foreign fire insurance tax. Basically covers it, and then we have some investments that earn some interest and things like that for us.
Police pension?
This is our police pension. So part of that property tax that is levied, we contributed over to the police pension to cover theirs. They use that money, they have a police pension board, they use it to invest as they see fit. So you'll see that $600,000 that comes from the property taxes. That's what the village contributes. You'll see the employee pension contributions. That's what the employees put aside from their pay. Pensions paid to members, just what it is. It's payments to retirees. We might have a little bit in legal fees. We have a little bit in dues, and a little bit in training because they have to maintain, the members of our board do have to maintain 16 hours to stay on the board. That's after, I think, 32 for their first year. So that's kind of the expense that relates to the police pension board.
Okay. That's the budget. Any questions?
Pretty good. I think we're about flat overall with the current year and about flat on operating with the current year. And that's a credit to everybody who worked on it. And the current year was down 4.4 overall, from 4.4% overall from the previous, as I recall, and about 3% on operating. So that congratulations to everybody over the past 2 years who's worked on this.
Well, again, we want to thank everyone involved with this budget, and we want to thank our controller for putting the thing together and pulling her hair out this last week to get it to us at a decent number of days ahead of time. So we have consensus on the tentative budget. Let's let the minutes show that. And we will be acting on the final budget probably the second meeting in April. There will be changes on this. First of all, a budget is a planning instrument, and a tentative budget is just that, tentative planning. And so there will be some changes on this, so look forward to that. Reason why we do this budget is every organization needs a budget, but really the process in a village like this is this is not really finalized until the appropriations ordinance occurs, which is in July. And so that, by approving the budget in April, that gives direction to all of our administration to use this until the appropriations budget is complete. So it gives them authority to go forward and run the financials, run the village until the appropriation ordinance occurs, and then that becomes the official, in our terms, budget. Any other questions on this? I apologize for all of you for taking so long, but we felt that it would be good to kind of lay this all out to everyone. Some of you have been here before, so you know it's a long process. But thank you again for all your work on this thing. Couldn't do it without you. I think what we will do now is we will adjourn to closed session. We've got a little bit to finish up there, and then we're going to totally adjourn shortly after that. So if I can have a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor say, no, roll.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Yarko.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Fair.
Yes.
All right, motion passed.